Fell in love with someone else, and got engaged, but didn't expect my male best friend of 10 years to completely shut down and disappear until he told me the truth about his feelings, and how long he'd loved me silently. You ever have one of those guys who just always exists? Not even in any kind of romantic sense, just existing, like a part of your day-to-day. That was me and Josh. 10 years, almost 11 if we're keeping it real. I met him in college. We sat together in this ordinary psychology class our freshman year, and the instructor had sat us together to do a project on emotional development, or something, which is funny in a way now that I look back on it. So we were cool with each other right off, not like flirtatiously or anything, just easy. At ease. He made me laugh, I made him laugh. We just became each other's go-to person, you know what I mean. Like if I had a fender bender, or I was sick and needed meds, or when I had my first real heartbreak and just wanted someone to sit around and watch stupid movies with, it was Josh. Always Josh. Over the years we'd have our own relationships, some short, some longer. I did have that one guy in my late 20s who I thought seriously about marrying, but that did not go too well. Josh did have a few legit girlfriends, but nothing ever panned out. I just thought that we were just those two people who relied on one another, platonically, until we found our person. We joked about it, in fact. Like, hey, if we're both still single at 40, we'll just get married and get a dog and have a little house. It was like a joke. Just a joke. And then I met Brian. It was abrupt, not like I wasn't careful or anything, but sometimes stuff just happens. He was sweet, stable, goal-oriented. He asked questions. He listened. And when he asked again a year and a half later, I said yes right away. I called Josh that evening, actually, before I even called my mom. That tells you how close we were friends. But his reaction, it was odd. I guess maybe he was in shock at first. He just kept repeating wow over and over. He didn't even say congratulations right away. And then later that night he texted back and said that he was happy for me, just needed to process. I didn't think much about it. I knew him. He was a thoughtful guy like that sometimes. But then something shifted. I'd invite him over for supper with Brian and me, he'd decline, that he had other things to do. I'd text him memes the way we always did and he'd just leave them on read. No smiley faces. No lols. No snark. Just silence. Or worst of all, short answers that tasted forced. I even started to question if I did something wrong. Did I make the conversation too big too soon? Did I ask him too few questions about his life? I invited him back a few weeks later to help me pack up some of the old boxes so I could move in with Brian. I thought some one-on-one would rattle his cage. He did come over though, and wasn't really there, you know. Spaced out. Fiddling with his phone. At one point, I kidded about how Brian couldn't tell two different shades of beige apart, and how I'd have to furnish the whole apartment myself, and Josh, he just stared at me. Not smiling. Not amused. Just this kind of vacant stare. And he said to me, "You sure this is what you want?" I laughed at first, nervous-like, because it was so out of place. I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said to me, "I remember this so vividly," he said, "just feels like maybe you're choosing safe. Not necessarily right." That really hit me hard. Not because I did, but because of where they came from. Josh had never questioned me like this before. Not when I was dating a man who ghosted me after 3 months, not even when I wanted to just up and move overseas for a job that I wasn't sure I really wanted. He was always the supportive one. Always there for me. And now he was questioning me? I brushed it off then, thanked him for his kindness but told him he was reading too much into the situation. He sort of nodded and said, "Yeah? Maybe." But it didn't sound like maybe. It sounded like he was serious. That night I lay awake all night. I kept replaying in my mind how he sounded, the way he looked at me. I even wondered if he just didn't like Brian, although they had barely spoken to each other. And then I thought, no, it's not that. It's something more. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't want to believe the thought that entered my head. The one I'd always dismissed whenever anyone cracked a joke about it, that Josh had feelings for me. Because it didn't add up. We'd been friends for so long. If he did have feelings, wouldn't something have fallen through before? Wouldn't I have picked up on it? Did you feel it? And then there were the events that started to fall into place in a way impossible to ignore. I remembered one night 5 years earlier when I'd broken up with someone. I was drunk and crying, and I told Josh that he was the only man that I could ever really trust. He rocked me back and forth when I cried and never spoke of it again. I'd thought back then that was just friendship. Now I wondered if there was more to it for him. I wondered about the fact that none of his girlfriends lasted over a year. He always found some excuse to dump them. Too dramatic. Too clingy. Too quiet. Too ambitious. What if no one good enough existed for him because they weren't me? It gnawed at me until I finally decided that I could no longer continue with the act that everything was okay. I had to talk to him, actually talk. So I asked him to the coffee shop we visited during finals week at college. Familiar ground. I didn't want to ambush him, but I did want explanations. Closure maybe. He was running late. 10 minutes. 15. Then he showed up and I could tell that he didn't want to be there. Or maybe he had, but he was scared. I asked him how he was. He said fine. I asked him if we could talk. He nodded. And then I just said it. Josh, are you mad that I'm engaged? Because I need to know what is going on. I can't continue to second guess. He did not respond right away. He gazed out the window, like he was hoping for a distraction to come along and save him. He glared at me and I swear to God, it was like I was looking at someone else. Not my silly, reliable best friend, but a man who was burdened with something he no longer could. He said, I thought I had more time. I locked up. Time for what? I asked, though I already did know. My stomach dropped. He continued talking. I thought I could just be around you long enough so you'd see. So you'd feel it too. I couldn't breathe. He continued, but you never did. And that's fine, it isn't your fault. I never said anything. I couldn't. You treated me like a brother. And I acted like I was okay with that. But I wasn't. Not really. I sat. Quiet. It all just fell in me. My skin went cold. My hands were shaking. He wasn't mad. He wasn't trying to play me. He was simply telling the truth, raw, painful, unfiltered. I wanted to answer, to attempt to reassure him maybe, or apologize for not knowing even though I was not at fault. But I couldn't. I didn't want to lie. I didn't love him that way. Not ever. I loved him like a friend, an irreplaceable, deep friend, but not the way he did. Not the way that would have made anything about this all right. And I understood then why he was pulling away. Why he said those strange, hurtful things. He was grieving something that never happened. A life that he imagined in his head that never even had a chance to take place. And I was also guilty. Not for something that I did that was wrong, but for not doing something at all. And sometimes that is the worst part, when you didn't do anything, yet you broke someone's heart. We just sat there for what felt like a couple of hours but was actually only a minute or two. There was the muffled buzz of steaming milk from behind the counter and a person's laughter at a table in the opposite part of the room, and I remember wishing I could dig my head into that moment and pretend this wasn't happening. That we were two old friends just hanging out, laughing about playlists and awful coffee. But that moment was gone. It was never coming back. I looked over at Josh, and he no longer met my eyes. He just stared at the bottom of his cup as if the truth had drained all the life from him. Perhaps it had. I mean, consider having it here for a decade. 10 years. And now that it had been let out, there wasn't joy but this terrible, canyon-like grief between us. I spoke his name quietly. He finally looked at me. I remember thinking he looked so exhausted. As if he hadn't slept. As if he was living in two parallel versions of our story, the one we actually had, and the one he'd created in his head, where maybe, sometime later, I would understand I'd loved him all along. And maybe that was the cruelest thing. That he actually believed it could be. So that I would suddenly see him differently. But I didn't. I couldn't lie. So I said the only honest thing that I could say. I love you, Josh. You know that. But not like that. I never did. And the moment I said it, I saw it hit him like a silent punch. He didn't flinch. He didn't get angry. He just nodded, as though he already knew, but had to hear it anyway to finally let go. He smiled afterwards, but it wasn't a real smile. Only that broken type of people smile when they're trying to be polite when their heart breaks. He responded, yeah? I figured. And then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out this crumpled, very old photo strip from one of those mall photo booths in college. We were probably 19. In the first picture, I'm sticking my tongue out. In the second, he's laughing. In the third, he's looking at me when I wasn't looking at him. I'd never even seen that before. I'd always thought that it was simply a dumb memory. But for him, it was something else. He handed it to me and told me, "I carried this in my wallet for almost a decade. Not because I thought you'd fall in love with me or whatever. Simply because it reminded me of a time when anything felt possible." And he stood up and said to me, "Take care of yourself, okay?" I tried to say something to him that I don't even know what it is, but he was already walking away. Out the door. Into the cold. I didn't burst into tears right away. I just sat there, holding this photo strip, feeling as though I'd just seen a page of my life go up in flames in front of me. You don't think about what losing a friendship like that means until it's gone. Everyone talks about breakups constantly, how to move on, how to get through it, but no one ever talks about friendship breakups, especially not ones like this. Where you didn't fight. Where nobody cheated or lied. Where love was real, just not the same kind. I went home and said nothing to Brian. Not that night. I had no idea how. I didn't even know how I felt. I wasn't in love with Josh, but that was irrelevant. This still hurt. It hurt a lot. Because it felt like I'd lost something that could never be regained. Not because I was engaged, but because the thing that I believed we had was based on nothing. Over the next few days, I kept reliving it all. Our previous books, the way he turned up for me when I hadn't even asked him to, how he turned quiet each time I'd speak about a new man. I felt I was reading my life through various glasses. And it brought everything into question. Had I been selfish not to see? Was he selfish not to warn me beforehand? Were we both pretending because it was easier than confronting the truth? I still have no idea. I only knew that Josh was not there. Not physically, he ceased answering, ceased liking my status updates, ceased text messaging, but emotionally, spiritually. It was as if he vanished from my existence, and I did not know if he was ever coming back. A month passed. Then 2. I tried to focus on the wedding. The planning, the guest list, the color, the flowers, but all of it felt strangely hollow. As if there was a place at the table that had to be filled. As if I was moving ahead and leaving behind a piece of the past. I thought about writing him a letter. I even sat down and started one. I never sent it. What would I say anyway? Sorry you loved me? Hope you're okay? None of it felt right. None of it felt adequate. I did end up telling Brian. Not everything, not in the most exacting way, but some. That Josh had said how he felt. That it was complicated. That he'd withdrawn. Brian didn't speak for a long time after I'd told him. Then he said to me, "Do you want him back in your life?" And I said to him, "Yes. But not in that way. I miss my friend." Brian nodded again. "So then maybe you give him space. And if he comes back, you know it's real. And if he doesn't?" He didn't finish that sentence. He didn't have to. And so I waited. Quietly. Not hoping really, but open. Just open. And every time my phone buzzed, a tiny part of me hoped it would be Josh. But it never was. It was the late spring when I at last heard from him again. I still remember the exact time I had been strolling back from being fitted for a dress with my mother, carrying this ridiculous bag of lace samples and color chips, soaked by a sun that didn't realize I was mentally exhausted. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I didn't even check it right away. I was juggling keys and coffee and not spilling it all over the front of my car. But once I got in, settled, and took a sip, I looked at my notifications and there it was. His name. Josh. Just a quick message: "Can I leave something for you? I won't stay long. Just something I need to give you." I stared at that screen for hours. I didn't even realize that I was crying until I could taste the salt. I hadn't seen or heard from him in nearly 3 months, and now, out of nowhere, he was back, not really back, but brushing the edge of my life like a ghost. I responded back, "Okay." That was all. Not yes. Not why now. Just okay. Because I didn't know how to respond otherwise. He asked if he could leave it on my porch that night, and I said that was okay. I didn't ask him what it was. I think I already knew it wasn't something simple. Not a gift. Not a box of old things or a forgotten hoodie. It was going to be him, somehow, and I had no idea of whether or not I was ready. That evening I kept looking out the window every few minutes, pounding hard, caught breath each time a car crept by. And then, just at dusk, I saw him. Hoodie up, head ducked low, walking like he didn't want to be seen. He moved forward, placed the brown envelope on the porch table, and turned around without looking in the direction of the door. I didn't open it right away. I waited. I sat on the floor next to the door, hands shaking slightly, just staring at it. I was afraid. I don't know of what exactly. Of what it might say. Or what it might confirm. Or maybe what it might cost me everywhere else again. And then I did finally open it. There was a letter penned, on that same notebook paper he always penned with to write in during his college years. And a USB drive. I opened the letter first. His handwriting was messy, like he had penned in a rush or maybe in tears. It wasn't long, but every word was weighted, as if everything had cost him to put it into words. He typed, "I've rewritten this so many times. This is the version where I don't try to make you feel guilty or pull you back. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. For a long time, you were my favorite part of the day. My laugh which I expected. Why I turned away individuals who probably were good for me. I thought that I could be okay with friendship only, and for a while I was. But watching you fall in love with other individuals, and now watching you pick someone to spend an eternity with, it broke something within me that I didn't know I had. That isn't your fault. Any of it. You were just being you, kind, open, warm. I just didn't see that being around you without really having you would become so much. I'm not angry. I'm just releasing. There is a video on the drive. It's just moments of our life. You will understand what I mean when you watch it. Be glad. Please. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember plugging in the drive. I simply remember the screen coming to life and this bland, fuzzy video cycled through shots that I didn't even realize he took. Us at that god-awful college party screaming like fools. Me trying to flip pancakes and messing it up. A fuzzy picture of us on a blanket in the park, heads tilted back, talking about constellations. And then, in between the laughter and chaos, were little moments of me smiling, laughing, pushing hair out of my face. I didn't know I was in most of them. But he did. He was behind the camera. Watching. Clinging to these tiny fragments like they were everything. There was one piece the very end that completely devastated me. It was shot late at night, him in the darkness, just speaking to the camera. He looked tired. Hollow. He said, "Do you ever love someone so much that you start to lose who you were before you met them? That's what she is to me. Not in some kind of fairy tale way. Just quietly. Always. And she doesn't know. She'll probably never know. And that has to be enough." I huddled on my floor, knees pulled up to my chest, and wept harder than I had in years. Not because I wished to love him, but because I couldn't. And because now I finally, really saw it all, how much of himself he'd been putting into me, quietly, stubbornly, without expecting a thing from me in return. And how much it had hurt him to do so. After that night, I never tried reaching him again. I wanted to so badly. But I knew he needed this space. This distance. Maybe even this end. And I had to respect that. I kept the letter. I kept the video. And sometimes when I am strong enough, I watch clips of it. Just to recall. Not that he loves me, but that he is there. My best friend. My anchor. My past. And even though I was still marrying, even though I was becoming a part of this new chapter in life, part of me would always carry Josh around with me, not as the man that loved me secretly, but as the boy that stood by my side when no one else would. Who loved me for everything that I was, even if I didn't love him back in the same way. The wedding came earlier than I expected. Time has this peculiar tendency of speeding when you are not ready, when your heart is behind your preparations. Everything was beautiful, the colors, the location, the lights draping the oak trees, the muted buzz of friends and family laughing, clinking glasses, adjusting their clothes. And Brian, he gazed at me like I was his whole universe, like there wasn't even a question in him. And I had to keep pace. I wanted to keep pace. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a piece of myself missing, because I wanted it to be Josh beside me, not because I had ever actually assumed he would be, somehow. Standing beside me. Smiling in a suit that was always a little too tight. Making some stupid joke at speeches. The "you're doing all right" look from the back of the room when I needed oxygen. But his seat was empty. I had held a place for him. I did not say why to anyone, not even Brian. But I had the planner hold a place for one chair, vacant, in the back. And I just kept glancing back at it throughout the ceremony, throughout the dinner, throughout the subdued moments between when the music faded and the throng dissipated. It was empty. I knew it would be. But still, I held on to hope. I don't even know why. Just hope. We danced. We drank. We toasted. I let myself be truly happy because Brian is a good man. He's stable, reliable, kind with my clutter. And he never once made me feel guilty for the pain I bore silently within. He never once asked me to be other than who I was. And that's something special and something that I knew I needed to cling to. It was the next day after the wedding, that pale, watery light through the hotel rooms, the smell of coffee in a paper cup and eyeliner still smudged under my eyes, when I finally got another message from Josh. Not long. Just congrats. I mean that. Wishing you peace always. That was all. And somehow it was everything. Not because I had any expectation it meant he was coming back, but because it meant that he was releasing in his own manner, and nonetheless choosing to be kind. I stared at that message for a bit. I did not reply. Not because I did not want to, but because there was nothing that I could say that would not just revive the very thing that we had already gently closed. Sometimes silence is mercy. Sometimes silence says, I still care, but I respect the distance. In the coming weeks, I tried not to think of him. And most days I did not. Life was full: dinner plates, packing boxes, new routines, Sunday mornings reading in quiet. But sometimes, a memory would surprise me. A phrase he'd repeat. A song we used to drive to. That evening we danced in the rain, dripping wet and laughing hysterically until my ribs hurt. None of those things went away. They just got soft. Tapered at the edges. One evening, maybe 4 months married, I was sitting out on the back porch staring out at the sky as it grew dark, that deep, bruised purple color that occurs right before it gets dark. Brian was in the kitchen, humming along to himself as he prepared supper. And I just sat there, holding this old photo strip Josh had given me years before, now a bit torn at the edges. I held it like it was holy. Because in so many ways it was. That photo strip held a part of my life I hadn't led but didn't regret, but still loved so hard for what it was. Josh was my 10-year best friend. 10 whole, messy, beautiful years. And though we did not have that finish people always hope for in movies, no big family reunion, no second opportunity of drama, we did possess something. We had something authentic. We had love. Not the kind you marry, but the kind that tells you who you are. The kind that constructs you. That hurts you a little. That remains in the room, long after the person has left it. I have no idea where Josh is anymore. I don't know if he ever fell in love again, or if he ever found someone who understood him the way he understood me. I wish he did. I wish someone really does get him and love him just as much as he should be loved. And if he ever does think of me, I hope that it's with compassion, not pain. Because even though he loved me silently for a decade, what he provided was never silent. It was loud and persistent and real. And I will keep that in mind forever. In a world of individuals who pass on and come through your life and depart leaving little in their wake, he marked something. A silent, disheveled, beautiful mark. And maybe that's sufficient. Maybe that is what it was meant to be,